And that's what we're seeing when I go out and interview CEOs, is they're augmenting their workforces as opposed to replacing their workforces. It doesn't mean that some tasks aren't being replaced. They are. That's the whole purpose of it. But you're replacing tasks, not people, and then people get reoriented to do other things. And so I think the effect on the labor market, we don't know the full impact yet, but no technology in the history of all technologies has ever reduced employment on net.
Hi, President Daly. Thank you for kicking things off with us.
Oh, I'm glad to do here. Thanks for asking me.
Of course.
What a big room. That's great.
It's a great room. So let's start with the tech sector. There's this idea that tech is more dynamic than the rest of the economy and can recover quicker, but is that a myth that we've seen disproven, and which macro forces are affecting the tech industry?
So for the longest time, tech has gone up when the economy has gone like this. And I think now you're hearing about layoffs and things, and it's caused a lot of fear, maybe not in this room, but certainly in people I talk to in the tech sector. They're worried that this is the end of growth in tech. And I think that's a myth. That part is a myth, right? Tech still has an upward trajectory because it's bringing us all kinds of new things that help us be better at business, better at how we live, making the world a better place. But it moves around like any maturing industry. There are going to be difficult years and better years, but overall, and many young people say, is it wrong to go into tech? Is this a dying industry? And I said, no, you can safely go into tech. And the most important thing in any industry is to be a lifelong learner and change what you're doing, because tech lives because it never stays static. It always moves. And I think that's the real recipe.
Yeah. You mentioned the layoffs we've seen in the tech industry. How did those affect the rest of the economy, if they did?
So the tech layoffs have been very narrow. They feel, of course, big to the areas where layoffs have occurred, but from the economy, it's been a very small portion. The labor market has remained very strong and to now solid, and the layoffs have been more limited to the tech sector, and largely about companies rebalancing in the wake of thinking that growth wasn't going to be the double-digit growth of the pandemic, but something more of a longer-run trend. So I think that's just in general a rebalancing, and what's important is tech workers are still getting tech jobs, and now many industries who couldn't find tech workers because they were being absorbed only by tech have been able to hire technologists and are happier for it. And I think that's the way productivity growth can actually be spurred, is when technologists go not just to tech sectors, but to other sectors and say, oh, we could do that better, faster, cheaper.
Interesting. So let's talk about AI, which you have some interesting thoughts on. How is it going to change the labor market?
Well, it's already changing the labor market in a way that's really important. So, when I think of AI, and I'm sure all of you think of AI this way, I don't think of generative AI and ChatGPT and the eternal November that started in just a couple of years ago. I think of machine learning and the decades really of research that's gone in, and the first autonomous car, which was in the 80s, not last year. These are all things that have been going on for a while, and RPA and has been shaping how industry and how services work. Now the exciting thing for many using generative AI is that we have a labor shortage and have had one for a while. We've had tight labor markets. They're softening and easing now, but they were tight. And firms are looking for ways to continue to meet output demand and do that more quickly and more efficiently. I was on a panel at the Aspen Ideas Institute with the CEO of Honeywell, and he said they've had labor shortages in core production for a while, and they're using generative AI technologies to actually augment workforces. And that's what we're seeing when I go out and interview CEOs, is they're augmenting their workforces as opposed to replacing their workforces. It doesn't mean that some tasks aren't being replaced. They are. That's the whole purpose of it. But you're replacing tasks, not people, and then people get reoriented to do other things. And so I think the effect on the labor market, we don't know the full impact yet, but no technology in the history of all technologies has ever reduced employment on net. It's changed the composition, and it's changed who is able to get jobs when, and the most important thing for making sure that workers are a part of that growth and that change is to have that lifelong learning, that growing and getting the skills that you need to meet the changing composition of demand.
Yeah. So at what point in that process do you think we are now? You've talked about this idea of task replacement, task creation? Where are we in that process with this technology?
So if you think of machine learning and RPA, we've done it, it's in process, we are, the firms are reaping the benefits of it. There's always more that can be done, and it can be more pervasively spread, but it's already in train. For generative AI, very early stages. I mean, these are, in many companies, just experiments. People are experimenting with, if I use this, what can I do? When we source work, it's usually in what we think of as back office operations. So one of the things that I think is a myth that I might just say is, I'm the 12th district president. Now, it's the San Francisco Fed, but it's the 12th district. The 12th district has 9 western states, and those are the coastal states where everybody thinks technology is booming, but it's also Utah, Nevada, Idaho, Arizona. When I go to companies in those states, which we're in here today, I was really glad to see the conference came to Park City, Salt Lake, because they have Silicon Slopes, they have a burgeoning tech sector, it's growing rapidly, but the companies here are using generative AI to think about how do they make your back office operations more efficient so you can actually put your resources on the profitable front office part. So I think that's what we're seeing already in companies, and I'm excited, but we're at early stages.
Yeah. And what about changes to productivity? I mean, estimates range from 7% to even just 1% in a recent paper. What's your view?
So we have this network we call the Emerging Tech Economic Research Network that we started at the San Francisco Fed in January of this year. And it was really to bring everyone together from private sector and industry with academics, with researchers in the Federal Reserve System and beyond, to ask these questions. What are the potential productivity gains? What's the potential effect on the labor market? And so we've been having these speakers in who are research economists. You're going to hear from one of them, Eric Brynjolfsson, who we haven't had in yet, but we want him on our docket. And the range of estimates is pretty wide. And you're also here if you're out speaking to people, and maybe if I just took a poll in this room, I would see the same range. There's everything from the dystopian to the utopian. But again, I think that history guides us to the middle and says that we can expect AI, generative AI, to at least contribute to the average productivity growth rate of our nation, which is about 1.5%. Now, can it do more? Well, that depends on us. Really, it can't just be a task replacer. If it's simply replacing the tasks that we already do, then that 1.5% productivity growth is probably what it looks like. But if it starts to allow us to create new opportunities, innovate, find ideas more easily, because it can take reams of information and make us faster at that, I think that has real power. I remember right when I started as the president, I'd been working at the Fed for a while, but I started as the president and I met the 30 under 30. And one of the young women in the 30 under 30 she was very interested in Parkinson's disease. And she said one of the problems with Parkinson's that couldn't advance the research is that there are articles written all over the world about it, but nobody could put them together because it was just too impossible. But generative AI allows you to feed all of that in and say, here are the 5 things that would be most productive to work on because you have this. Now that's an idea generation assistant, and I think that's where the possibilities are. So open question about whether it really boosts productivity. I think you're going to hear Eric talk about how it could, but ultimately technology is a tool, and whether it does or doesn't, if in a decade we say, oh, that was disappointing, well then that's because of us, not because of the technology. It has power. It's about, do we have the ability to figure out how to harness it?
Yeah, interesting. I'm going to come to everyone for questions in a moment, so start thinking. What are the decisions that policymakers and companies have to make to harness that power?
Well, I think for companies, and I'm already seeing them do that, there's 3 things you can do with the technology and workforce. You can replace workers, that's taking tasks, figuring out how to do it, and maybe even replacing whole jobs and people. You can augment, make people better with the technology, or you can create. And I think for firms, it's really about doing those 3 things, thinking about what is possible, not only what tasks can I get better at, and make them more productive, but also how can I augment my workforce so that they're better able to do their jobs and I can grow my sales or my output more quickly, more effectively. And then of course it creates opportunities. This is a way I use this example because everybody can understand it. When the iPhone first came out, I remember being in a conversation, not of technologists, but of other folks, and they said, I don't know what this is good for, it's just a bigger screen. And because it was not imagining past a bigger screen what was possible if you had that technology. And so that's a simple example, but I think that's what firms are able to do in industry. They're already thinking, what can I do with this that no one's even seen before? And that's where the power happens. Now, I'm not a policymaker in the regulatory space on this, but I do know that, having well-defined guardrails and other things helps prevent risk. And one of the areas where I'm deeply passionate is in data. Data are easily available now, but we have to be just as scrupulous in how we think about those and making sure there's good quality, that we know where the gaps are. We don't want to miss data that is important to making sure the models are trained appropriately. Whether that's true in machine learning or generative AI, you put poor data in, you get poor answers out. So making sure that data quality is there and data privacy is accompanying it.
Yeah. So let's go to a question that I think everyone probably has. Is a rate cut coming, and when?
Oh my goodness. See, you go to a brainstorm tech and you think, nobody's going to ask me about monetary policy, but then I think that whole Federal Reserve Bank president thing gives it away. So, what's really important now is that after a long fight against very high and persistent inflation, inflation is coming down, and it's doing so in a way that confidence is growing that we are getting nearer a sustainable pace of getting inflation back down to 2%, which is the commitment and the goal that we have. On the other side, the labor market is now slowing and coming back into better balance. And I'd say at this point, the risk to our mandated goals, which are price stability and full employment, and Congress gave us those goals, those are our two responsibilities, those goals are better balanced, and the risk to achieving those goals are better balanced. So we have to keep our eye on both sides of the mandate, and that means that over time, as inflation comes down and the labor market slows, we have to make sure that we're holding rates high enough that we don't lose that inflation fight, but not hold them too long and risk worsening the labor market to a point where it's challenging for people to get jobs. Ultimately, people want both things, price stability and full employment, and that's what we're doing. So I see a policy adjustment over the next, over the coming terms, and I'm not going to give a term. I'm not going to give time-based guidance. I'm not going to tell you when the rate cut is, how many rate cuts might come. But I do think it's time that, you can see it from Chair Powell gave remarks today. There's just a time period where some normalization in policy is a likely outcome, but how likely it is depends on the data that come in, not where we're standing today. We have a lot more information to get before we can make any real determination.
Interesting. So do we have any questions for President Daly? Oh, one right there. Lots of questions. Please, if you could just introduce yourself briefly.
Raja Dodala, Churchill Asset Management. President Daly, question for you. My understanding is that the 2% number was just picked out of random by someone, I don't know, New Zealand. Is there any discussion about whether that's the right target?
So that's not completely true. In fact, not at all. I mean, it's probably an internet myth. So Reserve Bank, right, how New Zealand gets dragged into this is the Reserve Bank of New Zealand, Central Bank of New Zealand, actually did inflation targeting early on, and they were the first central bank to officially go to inflation targeting. The Federal Reserve had long had an understanding that lower inflation is the best way to maintain a healthy economy. It's the foundation of a good economy. And then we picked a 2% target, but that really had little to do with the fact that the Reserve Bank of New Zealand had done it, and everything to do with you want an inflation target that isn't so high that people think about inflation all the time. You really want it to be a background variable. And you don't want it too low and risk the fact that if it goes down, which it can do, if it falls, you get into deflation, which Japan has been struggling for 2 or more decades to get out of, 3 decades really. So you wanted to pick a number that give you a little buffer, but also didn't have it in the front of people's minds. And so I think 2% is a reasonable target that we have been successful at trying to achieve over time. Sometimes we run too low, as we did for a decade leading up to the pandemic, and right now we're still trying to bring inflation back down to target. But I think that keeping 2 is really important, especially now when we're not at 2, because that is the foundation of our credibility.
Interesting. I think we had another question up here. Oh, right there.
Yeah, hi, my name is Siddharth Agarwal, and I'm with a SaaS software company called Freshworks. So when the interest rates started going up, first it affected the technology companies quite negatively because of the future cash flows. And then, the whole AI stuff with NVIDIA and the supply chain around TSMC, SML, et cetera, those companies have been just killing it. Where do you see how do you see these companies doing from a valuation perspective, both the ones that are in the chip side of it, AI chip side, and tech companies that are not in the AI chip side as the interest rates come down?
Well, one of the things that I have learned from, I started at the Federal Reserve Bank of San Francisco as a research economist, fresh out of getting my PhD, and I was right in the middle of the boom in technology and ultimately the computerization. And what I learned at that point in time, and it still remains true, is that the valuations on whether it's a .com or tech, they move around in ways that aren't always tied to the movements of the real economy and to interest rates. So how the change in interest rates will affect the valuations is not clear, but I do know this, and this is something that's really important to policymakers. It doesn't directly answer your question, but I think it's an important thing to say. There was a long 5 years period where researchers worried that monetary policy could no longer be effective, that our transmission mechanism was muted, maybe even broken, because the big driver of the economy was tech. And so when we raised interest rates and the tech sector felt it, it is, I'm sure, not pleasant for the tech sector, but a good reminder that the transmission mechanism, monetary policy works, the Fed raises the interest rate, other interest rates move in lockstep, and the economy slows. And I think that it just reminds us all that new industries come and they're up there and they're the forefront, but they still respond to the monetary policy tool. And that was a useful thing for us to see in real time. How NVIDIA will do when we lower the interest rates eventually, I don't know. If I knew that, then I'd be able to do more like crystal ball predictions. I'm just completely focused on the path of policy.
Interesting. Well, on that note, we're in an election year, a dramatic one. With the Trump presidency, we might see a pretty abrupt change in policy. Does that affect your ability to land the plane as you've described it?
So one thing that I think is really useful for everyone here to hear, if you haven't heard it before, or know if you've heard it again, it's always a useful reminder, is the Fed is a completely apolitical, non-political organization. And we were given our goals by Congress. And the goals were independently, without an eye to politics or the administrations or the fiscal environment we're in, to really just think about what would you do to get monetary policy of one tool and two goals, price stability, full employment. What would you do to the interest rate to ensure that we achieve these two goals simultaneously? So that's what we're working on. And we at the Fed do not deal in hypotheticals. We work with the economy we have. And right now, the economy is, it's an economy that is slowing, moving back to a sustainable pace of growth in the labor market and lower inflation, but we're not there yet. So even though we're getting nearer a time when I think that we will achieve those goals we had, we're not there yet, and that's where the focus has to be.
Interesting, but Trump has been particularly hostile even toward the Fed. That doesn't worry you?
This is where history comes in handy, is that there's always, independence is something you have to continue to earn, and that independence, we've had many times in our history where presidents have wanted a different outcome or political leaders have wanted a different outcome, but Congress has said repeatedly, we want you to build an outcome that is price stability and full employment. So I don't feel worried about it. I feel focused on serving the American people. The chair of the Fed was on 60 Minutes, and if you didn't catch it, there was really one point that was very important. He said our most important asset is our integrity. And I would add to that, our most important tool is the trust the American people have in us. And so maintaining that apolitical nature and just working hard on delivering on our goals, that's what, the American people are like our shareholders. I think you all understand shareholders. They're like our shareholders. We have to earn their trust and their respect by doing great work. So that's what we're doing.
Okay, well, thank you so much, President Daly.
Thank you.